Okay, the other guy was Trent Horn. Yeah, I think I found him. I'll give the YouTube link to it.
I can't seem to find the mall link. What is it titled?
I'll throw it in there.
Thanks. Yes. Yes, Paul Copen. The answer is yes.
The answer is C.
See.
The answer is always C.
When I clicked on that link, it says I need permission.
Yeah, which one to the video?
The one that you just put up.
Oh, okay, yeah. Part of the link up there first.
Oh, okay.
And Reuven posted a link to Google Docs, I guess.
Okay, here we go. The Arch Heretic. So,
Yeah, people are already not liking it.
uh-oh. What are the complaints?
He's too much the apologist in some ways.
Uh-oh. We don't like apologists around here.
Well, I haven't read it at all yet, so I've got to get to that.
Ow.
Or we could always go back to Harnack.
Who's Harnett?
Adolf Von. He's like one of the first scholars of Marcion. According to some outdated, but you know how that goes. That's what
Yeah.
Dr. Price calls anxiety of influence, where people want to divorce themselves from older scholarship when they actually are not contributing much in addition to it. Before 1950, yeah. It always bugs me when they don't translate stuff. I have to dispose of my children. Put them to bed. No, David, I have not started reading Maul at all. So who do we have here as Marcion scholars, or Marcion scholars? Nobody, because I was going to step away from it, say goodnight to the kids, so I figure you guys just talk amongst yourselves. Okay, I hate to interrupt. I don't know. We're going to have anything worth saving? Apart from the other Hangout, probably leave that in. Oh, yeah. So as far as Marcion goes, I almost know nothing. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to read a book on Marcion. And Maul's book was recommended by Daniel Galado because it was supposed to be like the latest word on Marcion, and kind of like the new scholarship on Marcion, getting away from the assumptions of Harnack and people like that, the older crowd. Also, he recommended R. Joseph Hoffman's book on Marcion, but that's really expensive. And Leon, who keeps getting kicked out, he recommended John Knox's book, not the John Knox the Reformer, but a more recent scholar of the same name. And as far as what I know about him is really like from Dr. Price, that he might have, some of the things that he did might have formed the foundations of the legends of Paul the Apostle, because there's some similarities there. But he was considered a heretic, which is a relative term, so there was a saying that you had to be careful which church you walked into in any given city at that time to make sure it wasn't one of Marcion's churches, because they were virtually indistinguishable from the supposedly Orthodox Catholic Church of the time. So you didn't want to walk into a church full of heretics by mistake. And his basic idea was that Christianity had no use for the Old Testament. The Jews had their God and their scriptures, and it was totally separate from Christian scriptures. So he supposedly started the first canon, and that consisted of what scholars have called an edited version of Luke, all all but three, I think, of Paul's epistles. I might be wrong on that, and some writings that he did. And allegedly, the Catholic Church decided to form their own canon in response to Marcion. And there's other details, but bits and pieces, but that's basically what I know about Marcion.
I wonder how things would have developed, had he not done that, like how the development of the canon, if it happened much later, because there was no one really to respond to. It would be interesting to know what would have developed.
It's also kind of controversial whether he actually did that or not. So there's some people that would argue that no, he did not actually start canon formation himself, that was strictly a Catholic innovation and was not done in response to anything that Marcion did. And it's typical to want to take credit for being the precedence for any given thing.
Right.
Natch. Yeah, Marcion has some lost writings. Uh, one I'm aware of is called the Antitheses. So what scholars exactly think those are, you could just Google Marcion's antitheses if you want to really pronounce it the way it's written. Very fragmentary, fragmentary. That there's anything left of that book. Only in the writings of his enemies. So it's one of my harebrained theories that when you have a lot of diverse Christianities all vying for central place, one of the things that's going to make your particular branch of the tree better in its claims to being orthodoxy or close to the original apostolic faith or what have you, is to give itself roots. Further back you can go, the better. It's one of the reasons why you'd want a historical Jesus is because if there was an actual Jesus that lived and walked the earth, that means he was in a definite place at a definite time. He said certain things. He spoke to people that were alive at some point for a lot of the early Christians, supposedly. Passed down his teachings, word of mouth to a select group of few that passed it on to their disciples. So it is better to say that you have a historical Jesus that your group is descended from rather than some other group that might say, well, our Jesus came to us in visions. So Marcion, I think it's a similar thing. At some point, the Christian emergent church needed to give itself some historical roots. Hither to that, they were moving fast and free without a definite canon of scripture. So the first thing they needed to do was to give themselves an ancient pedigree. They basically, in my opinion, hijacked the Hebrew scriptures and started interpreting it and using it as if it was a book about Jesus rather than a cultural product of a particular people that belonged to those people. And by doing so, you include the entire Jewish history as part of your own, and thus gives yourself a claim to an antiquity and a reach back into a more ancient cultural lineage than you would have had before. Which reminds me of something I saw in that uh, video that I posted, the link to in the chat with Carrier. It's whenever Carrier uses some terminology to describe what's going on in the past. He's talking about uh, the earliest Christians had hallucinations of Jesus, whereas other people might use a less loaded term and say, "Oh, visions" or something like that. But it's funny because Carrier doesn't pull any punches. He usually says some wild terminology. The other thing that struck me was that what was his name? Horn, I think it was. Anyway, he was talking about Carrier's idea of the cosmic sperm bank, which was kind of funny image in my mind, you know. I won't get into exactly what that means because I'm not too clear on it myself. I'm not sure if Horner was explaining it in a way that Carrier meant it, but just some of the terminology is hysterical. But there was another point I was going to bring up, and I can't remember what it was now. It was related to that. It'll pop in my head. Or I'll get tired of talking. Oh, I remember what it was. Got me thinking about, because Carrier borrows some of Doherty's ideas about these hallucinations and visions of Jesus, which was the impetus to the earliest Christian movement. To me, whenever I read Paul's letters, or even say Doherty's discussion of them, what strikes me is not so much visions that they're having that's the important thing. It seems to be everything is according to the scriptures. So what I'm thinking is it's not so much that they're hallucinating visions of Jesus, but they're finding him in the Septuagint, specifically the Greek Old Testament. They're finding things that he did and said there. And when you're talking about something that's considered the Word of God, there's really no distinction between the written Word of God and the actual mind of God and creative force of God. So basically, if you're saying that Jesus lived in the mind of God and the Word of God in the Scriptures, then it's actually like he's living in an actual world. So you can talk about a Jesus in the Scriptures that you might discover in prophecies of Isaiah, or misreading prophecies or taking them out of context, or however you're getting them. For the first Christians, this was tantamount to saying that we know what the Messiah said and did, or the Christ, or whatever you want to call him, because it's right there in the Word of God. Mm-hmm. So it seems like whatever takes place in the mind of God it has a reality of it, whether it actually occurred in history or not. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, what was important to Paul, and it wasn't so much that he was getting visions and directives from Jesus. You know, I have no word of the Lord on that. I'll get back to you. It's because he doesn't have scriptural precedents for which he can give advice, for instance, on certain matters. Well, now that you bring that up, I can't think of anything in my readings of the Septuagint that might speak to that. So, or he might find something that would be, depending how you would read it. I'm not saying that he didn't have actual visions. Probably a lot of them did, but I think what the primary impetus was that they were getting their information out of, and not necessarily just what we would consider scripture in the strictest sense, but other things too, intertestamental literature, like the Ascension of Isaiah, which has become um, back to the fore. There's been a lot more studies on that document, some more critical information, some things that scholars are beginning to find in some of this stuff that they weren't aware of before. A lot of it because they've taken for granted. 100 years or so, since the last version of it was published, no further work's been done on it. Some of the scholars are revisiting some of that work, some of these older things, collecting manuscripts, recensions, and discovering that a lot of the assumptions were not quite right because we didn't take into account all the information that we've had since then, or even had at the time, but we didn't collate it or whatever, or understand the relevance of it even, or importance of it at the time.
And one of the aspects of Doherty's reading that kind of struck me was that the only real temporal reference, the only thing that Paul's letters indicate has transpired recently, is the realization of what the scriptures say, as in like at the end of Romans, this mystery has now been revealed to us, or even when he says that Christ or God's Son has been revealed in me. It's like that's the recent events, whereas the doings and the feats of Jesus himself, that's like a cosmic thing. It just is, like from the foundation of the world. That's an interpretation of the Christ theory that I found very persuasive.
Yeah, I think that's what got me off on that tangent was when I was reading that. I think I read that in Doherty, and I was thinking that when you're reading the scriptures, that's basically a timeless now. There's no history. It could be, you could say it's happening now or a million years ago or a million years from now. It really doesn't matter. But like you said, that one thing that struck me was that after all these centuries, somebody's finally come along to actually figure it out finally. Yeah, I have that. I read that like twice, and then I got his longer book too. I've never actually read it from cover to cover, the newer one. But I was going through it for Dave Mack, who probably know or don't know as blind dude, and I was trying to determine exactly how much of the Jesus puzzles, and basically the whole book is inside this other book, and it's just expanded around it. So if you prefer ebooks, you might as well get Jesus, Neither God Nor Man, because it's got the Jesus puzzle in it, but it's just like 3 times more information as well. So. And that was a big problem that when I was reading some of the chapters of Jesus, Neither God Nor Man, is that he spends a lot of time answering his internet critics. And one of the problems that people were bringing up, and his point of view, which he defends vehemently, is his idea of the multiple layers of heaven. And this was brought up by Carrier, and that's why I thought of it during the debate video, is that the world below the moon, the air, where the demons of the air are, the air just immediately above the earth, and that which is below the earth. And you have to go through a lot of convoluted readings about where this Messiah was crucified. He took on the semblance of flesh, was crucified by the aeons of the age, or whatever. Archons of the aeon. Yeah, archons of the aeon. And you have to impart something very Hellenistic to Paul's thought and even the Jewish milieu that he lived in, that they had these divisions of heaven and they corresponded to everything that appears to be saying. I thought a way around that was to say that, well, you don't actually have to say that this particular theory applies to Paul, that you could say that he's saying this stuff is occurring according to the scriptures, in the world of the scriptures. There you don't have to posit a multi-layered structural heaven, third heaven, seventh heaven, whatever you got, as an alternate way of looking at it. I don't know. I've really never pursued the line of thought. It's just something that occurred to me. So, I don't know. I talked myself out of that one. Talked myself out. About impressions. It's when Dr. Price and he could do Charlton Heston. Oh yeah, and I did listen to that one audio of Carrier and Dr. Price talking about the new Exodus movie. And apparently both of them liked Noah better than they liked Exodus. So if anybody else listening, anybody else have anything to say about that?
Well, I thought no. I can see why they like. I can see why they like Noah better, because it seemed to be more inventive and sort of recreating, Noah's internal frustrations of what was going on. Whereas I think in the Exodus movie, it really wasn't much. It was really kind of just not really pursuing, what was going on between Moses's ears or mind or whatever.
Now, they said that the movie was originally like 4 hours long, and then it was edited to 2.5. So that means there's like an hour and a half of the original movie missing.
In the Exodus movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too bad, because I kind of like the idea of presenting God as a little boy, and you kind of get the conversations going back and forth between Moses and God. So that was interesting, but of course it's all just fanciful.
Yeah, I guess the big problem was that they had a lot of things that they never developed. Maybe it was just a question of poor editing, to where things seemed to be going somewhere and then were suddenly dropped, or people seemed to pop in as characters for no particular reason. Other things happened with no justification leading up to it, because maybe that was important stuff that got left on the cutting room floor. Who knows? Hard to say. But now, in the old days, you would go to a 3-hour movie, or even longer, like the Ten Commandments or something. You'd have an intermission and stuff, and you go into the lobby and get your gefilte fish and stuff, whatever they had at the counter there, and you go back in and see the rest of it. So it's not like having a long movie is such a terrible thing.
Yeah. I think also in the Exodus film, there's a great actor, the guy that was, I don't know his name, who played Joshua. He's in Breaking Bad.
He's the star of Breaking Bad. He's
the co-star of Breaking Bad.
Oh, okay.
He was the meth addict. And he's a great actor. It would have been good if they kind of developed a dialogue between Joshua and Moses, but they didn't do that at all.
Well, David points out that the child in there was not actually God himself, but like God's messenger, angel of God, whatever you want to call him.
Well, yeah, whatever.
But then I would have, if I had seen it, I would have felt ripped off. Because at least in the Ten Commandments, you got the voice of God coming out of the burning bush, and it was Charlton Heston's voice anyway. So I thought that was very psychologically well done.
Yeah.
Made you wonder.
I mean, I appreciate
Moses.
I appreciate the fact that they tried to put some flesh and bones on the characters for Noah and Moses instead of just doing the traditional sort of hero worship stuff.
My headphone plug-in fell down on the ground. Yeah, you couldn't make the 1950s version today. I mean, audiences are different. They have different expectations for movies.
Yeah. Personally, I'd like to see Jesus interacting with prostitutes. Show what he was actually dealing with. If he was hanging out with drunkards, yeah, drunkards and such. I'd like to see that played out.
Yeah, exactly. Why and how, what occurrences and what events would lead his enemies to accuse him of being a drunkard, for instance, because it's not just because you're in the vicinity,
Right. So that's a whole movie in itself. That'd be great.
Well, unfortunately, I didn't see Exodus, so I did see Wizard of Oz in the theater. And you know what that experience was like? It was like watching it on a big screen TV, and it wasn't even as clear as the HD TV in your living room would be. So it starts off with Robert Osborne introducing the movie like he would on any TCM showing of it on TV. And the theater was probably half full. I thought it'd be a lot more people to see it, but it's not that much interesting anymore. To go and spend good money on it. But, there's like several rows with nobody in it in front of me, behind me, and then people come in just as the movie starts and sit down right next to me.
That's always lovely.
Hey, if it was packed full of people, I would understand that, but when it's half empty like that, there's no reason you have to actually sit elbow to elbow with a stranger.
Yeah, that's weird. That reminds me. Recently, I was at a beach, and it was same idea. It was almost nobody there, and this family came by with husband, wife, and a few kids, and they parked themselves like right behind me. It was like, what the hell are you doing? There's a whole beach here for you. Get away from me! I'm trying to read. I was reading Crossan's Birth of Christianity. It was crazy.
And not try to read it with kids hitting the back of the head with a frisbee.
Yeah, exactly. It was a little distracting. When you're reading Crossan, you don't need any distractions.
Yeah, I was trying to read The Fabricated Paul by Herman Dettering at the beach, and I was just like baking the sun, and I was waiting for this family to leave underneath the covered picnic tables. But before I do, some other family comes there, and they just like sit on the edges of the bench waiting for them to leave, right? And we've been sitting there next to it and polite enough not to bother the people that are there. But before those people even leave, they just show up and just start muscling in, Oh, that was it really upset me.
It's amazing of people that lack of consideration. It's really amazing.
Especially in Illinois, because whenever anybody does something really, self-centered like that, I'll usually make a comment like, "Yeah, well, I'm not from here, unlike you people." Because I don't know, I've lived all over the place, and I'd say Illinois is full of some of the most self-centered people I've ever seen in my life.
Isn't that something? I mean, you really make those kind of generalizations in localities.
Yeah, and if somebody else told me that, I'd say, "Psh, yeah, you're going to judge the whole state by your puny little corner of it." Well, people do that all the time. They judge the entire world and never left the county, you know. But my perceptions are a lot more educated. So if I say it, I have spoken.
Yeah, well, if you've seen, you've had the experience of being in other communities where, the likelihood of seeing those attitudes is diminished, then it makes sense.
Yeah, I've lived in 4 states or 5 states for extended periods of time, and then I've traveled all over the planet. So I've seen all kinds of cultures, all kinds of people.
You've been over the planet?
Yeah, and possibly off the planet, but not too sure about that. Those brain cells are pretty damaged. And since I'm adopted, there's no telling where I came from, really. I was born in Fargo, Eh? But I was adopted before I was even 1 year old, so no recollection of North Dakota. Never been back since. Been to South Dakota, though. When I was there, that guy just started carving that mountain sculpture of Crazy Horse, and he hadn't even been finished blasting the armpit hole out yet. And I took a look at it online the other day. It's pretty well sculpted out now, but it was. You remind me of the Flintstones episode where they go to see the Grand Canyon, and it's just this little tiny line of water in the ground. So yeah, in a couple million years, it's going to be a big deal. What are you doing? Sharpening knives?
Getting ready for the kill.
Nothing like dissecting an argument. Literally. Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I might as well mention it now that we're live, though. The ebook, the Kindle version of Dr. Price's The Human Bible that just came out, I was going over it, and about 70% of the footnote links don't function correctly. So I contacted Frank Zindler, and he put me in touch with his daughter, Catherine, who did this version. Apparently, they had used different software this time. Instead of doing it the way they've been doing their ebooks, she used Adobe InDesign, which I'm not familiar with because it costs money. Anything that costs money, I have no knowledge of whatsoever. So whatever she did, she didn't do it quite right. So, like the first chapter or 2 chapters seem to function okay, but after that, you click on a footnote link, and it might take you to the footnote, but it won't take you back to where you were reading. And then after a while, you can see where it doesn't take you to the right footnotes. It ends up taking you to the same numbered footnote always in the first chapter. So if you're in the 10th chapter and you click on footnote 15, you end up in footnote 15 of the first chapter. It's just a mess. So
Oh, wow, that's
I
terrible.
offered to help, do whatever I can to make it easier to try to fix it. But I suspect that they didn't really save their intermediate work. So once they completed it, they basically got rid of the files and all that. So it probably would be a big deal to try to fix it. They would have to basically start all over again.
Oh, boy.
Now, I could probably help them out just by modifying the actual ebook that they've distributed so far. It might take about a week to go through all the footnotes or so, but I could do it, and then I could send them a new version that they could upload. But
Hmm.
they haven't gotten back to me, so this was like emailed them Saturday, and then I heard back from Frank Sunday morning, and then his daughter Sunday night, but I have not heard back from them since. So don't know what they've decided to do, if anything. But the way Amazon works is that you could republish it with a corrected version, but only the people that buy it after you do that is going to get the updated version. Everybody who's downloaded it, for example, on Kindle Unlimited or paid for it and downloaded it, will not get updates. You have to contact Amazon customer service and tell them, I need to send out a new edition because there's significant changes to the one that's been out there. So they have to approve it. You have to tell them what's wrong. They have to approve. This could take a couple weeks too for them to get around to doing this stuff. You have to prove it, and then they will enable you to, I don't know if they do it or you do it, but they will put up the new version that will then be pushed out to those who already have it through the WhisperNet system. And that's only for people that have gone into Amazon setup on the website and turned on automatic updates. There's a lot of people who probably don't even know what that is or even how to do it. So they would never get the updates anyway. But those who did would eventually get these automatic updates. But if you don't do that, if you just put up, withdraw the new version and republish it again through Kindle Direct Publishing, only people that get it after that are going to get the corrected version.
Wow, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I would. It is unfortunate because I've done 7 or 8 ebooks of Dr. Price's now for American Atheists, and I would never have let that leave my site without checking all that stuff.
Right. Yeah, I bought it myself, so it's good to know that before I start trying to look up footnotes.
Yeah, there's a load of them too. There's like 3 times as many footnotes as the comparable books in the Pre-Nicene New Testament.
Wow.
Another way is to say like they do correct it and I get a hold of a new version. I could just take the file and send it to my Kindle, for instance, directly through a cable or whatever, and send it out to other people that I know about who would need it, But that'd be kind of tough for hundreds of people.
Right. Yeah, I'm surprised that something like that would be overlooked.
Yeah. They really should ask me more to help them out more. At least to verify something, or could you just take a look at it real quick? Because it
Well,
wouldn't
this
have
might
took me all of a half hour to figure it out.
well this might be the event that makes that more likely.
Yeah, and I not volunteering to do all the work. Just it wouldn't take me very long to do a lot of that checking because I have to do it for stuff I do, and I have proprietary and secret techniques of doing stuff like that. And I could do it really quickly for them. The cat's freaking out. Charlie, go.
So, John, if you have that kind of skill and ability, I'm surprised you're pursuing a teaching position.
Oh, there's no work in that.
Really?
Yeah, because how often do people, need ebooks done, major companies don't contract it out. For example, they do it in-house. And to do a basic ebook that's, that would work, even somebody like a septuagenarian like Doherty could do it himself, and he's done it himself. So there really isn't a whole lot of call for people with that skill. So I was only able to get just a few commissions here and there, and that was it.
Oh wow. So yeah, so you would have to just like work for one publishing company, and that's not lucrative.
If I could get a job with a company, yeah, using those skills, but I never had any luck doing so, so that's why I did it freelance.
Hmm.
But I could do like a really, really good one. But most companies don't care about really, really good. As long as it works. Because the last ebook I did for American Atheist Press was that one by Dr. Price, The Case Against the Case for Christ, the one against Lee Strobel. And with that, I did all the Bible links linked to Bible Gateway, so you didn't actually have to have a Bible open on your desk, or you had to have electronic Bible sitting on the tablet or what have you. You could just click it and it would take you to the Bible Gateway for that. And the few other references to other translations like the Septuagint, which is not on Bible Gateway, unfortunately. Take them to find, that particular chapter and verse from Brenton's Septuagint translation at some other site. So, I made sure all that stuff worked. And I checked out every link, right? Because I can't take a chance that, one or two of those might be bad. Because that reflects on me or reflects on people that are paying me money,
Right.
So I'm the kind of person that would check out the 100 and some internet links manually to make sure they all functioned, But I did miss something in that book. Because Dr. Price uses, I should have checked for this, he uses the symbol font for things like arrows and odd little characters here and there, rather than their Unicode equivalents. And Unicode works on more e-readers than symbol fonts. So if you fired up Case Against the Case for Christ on your Kindle, eventually you would find a thing where there's 3 names instead of an arrow pointing from each of the names to show a progression. There's like tic-tac-toe signs or something. So it wasn't a major thing, but that was the only thing I found that I missed in the whole thing. It's just like that one occurrence of 2 or 3 of that arrow symbols that should have been replaced by Unicode arrows. So I figured it wasn't even worth, republishing it so that people would get the new version with that fix in it by fixing it. So I just let it slide. It's not too bad. But if they ever do a new edition, definitely want to correct it. I was reading what David said in the chat, and I think the people that were interviewing Carrier and Price, or maybe it was Price himself, somebody said that they would really like to see a movie done of the Book of Revelation. I mean, a literal CGI intensive version of the Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be kind of cool because it's a wild ride anyway, even to read it.
Well, there's so many. I mean, not just the Book of Revelation, but the Bible is full of the scenarios that could just be so exciting using CGI. I'm surprised they don't do it more often.
Yeah, just certain things. Oh, what real funny was Dark Matter. Don't ask me what the 4 numbers are after his name. But he does those flash animations about the Bible. And this was a 3-parter on Samson. And Samson was an Arnold type character. and all the different looks of Arnold through different movies, I guess, painted up like Conan the Barbarian for part of it. It was just hysterical. It was one of the better ones that I've seen in a long time. But there is, Samson isn't even a real particularly exciting story, more of a bizarre love kind of story in a way. There are other weird stuff going on about that'd be good to make a movie out of. They never have. Like the genocidal conquest of Canaan would make a really good movie.
God's greatest hits.
I thought it was kind of funny in the Noah movie where Noah's telling his family the story of Genesis while they're on the boat. So he's telling it as the Bible is describing it, but the visuals are like modern evolutionary Big Bang theory. So, there's a Big Bang and the Earth forms out of a ring of dust around the sun, and then what do you know? Here comes a large Mars-sized object, collides with the Earth and forms the moon, just like in the modern moon collision theory of origin. Now, what if that turned out to be wrong? Then the Bible is really messed up. Because if the Bible preaches the moon collision theory, and that turns out to be wrong, that's a big deal. Moon collision origin theory. Usually Reuven would have already had a link in the chat to that by now, I'm sure, but he's probably totally disinterested. Funny.
I was also very struck by that little CGI sequence in the Noah movie interpretation of Genesis, and kind of time lapse melding it with the scientific accounts of the universe, and reminded me of a very interesting. It's just a little 2-sentence or so quote here from an old essay that Stephen Jay Gould, the late scientist, had written from a bishop. Let's see how long ago this was. 17th century. Thomas Burnet, kind of an early rationalist, you might call him, who said, quote, "'Tis a dangerous thing to engage the authority," as in like invoke the authority, "of Scripture in disputes about the natural world in opposition to reason, lest time, which brings all things to light, should discover that to be evidently false, which we had made Scripture to assert." So he kind of figured out how once you interpret, or make Scripture say a certain thing, you're kind of going out on a limb, because you never know what science will come up with.
Jim, didn't you post that somewhere online? I thought I read that somewhere.
It could be. It could be. It's something. It really kind of a little splinter in my brain for a while.
Well, it's so true.
Yeah, and he had kind of had that nailed about 400 years ago, so I'm glad to see that the Christians have made some real progress.
Oh, definitely. Don't learn from mistakes, though. I had this real interesting book that I found in my father-in-law's attic. I guess it belonged to his wife's father, or I think it was his wife's father. Done a bunch of books. He was a school teacher in the early 20th century. And one of the books he had was this really weird book. It was like very early science, still the ether theory of physics, and the world was only a couple million years old, but it's progress. And every other chapter would be about spiritualism. So you'd read about scientific theories of the day, and you'd flip the page, and they'll talk about the validity of table tapping and mediums and stuff, as if that's like science. It's just very strange to go back and forth chapter by chapter, and switch between these two things. It's a very, very weird book.
What was the overall purpose of it?
Purpose was to show, I think the author's theme was the superiority of science and rationalism over the old ways of thinking. So I would imagine that his views on spiritualism, which was very popular when this book was written in England, fit into that worldview. That there was some kind of rational, scientific explanation for the phenomena, I would imagine. But I couldn't stay with it long enough to get to that part.
Yeah.
But it had a good chapter on the Inquisition, just all the stuff, and he's like railing against religion in the science chapters. And then you flip over and he's praising mediums and seances and stuff. So it was quite, after a while you just couldn't take it no more.
Yeah.
Just try to dig that book up and maybe scan that one too. It's probably already online somewhere, because I had this old book on the Inquisition. It's huge and thick and moldy and old and stinky. And I thought, who would ever have this book? This is probably the only copy left on Earth. And then here it is on archive.org, scanned from a book that was probably almost in the exact same condition as mine. If not my very own, that somebody snuck in my house and scanned while I wasn't looking.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking that they probably were looking at these mediums and spiritist experiences as, observable data, as opposed to, people just recounting, generations old dictums and legends. So it was probably seen as getting closer to connecting with the other world, because there was something about it was observable.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. That would appeal to people, especially when we're dealing with rationalism, because that's like a whole mindset in itself, where things that are supernatural, things that are weird, out of the ordinary, can't be miracles. They must therefore have some kind of naturalist, rational explanation.
Right.
To figure out what it was. So, and like you said, yeah, you could sit down and you could test a medium, you could verify their predictions, verify, the information that they're passing along from this. So yeah, that would appeal to especially in the early days of science, when there was still, where the field wasn't even quite delineated yet.
Right.
Then I found my book, Freud's Interpretation of Dreams, and I thought I had given that to somebody and they never returned it, but they must have, because I found it in the garage. There's still a couple books, though, that are missing that I wish I could find. Maybe they'll turn up. you know, since the SOBs are going to do that Marcion thesis starting this coming Sunday, I was trying to finish up digitizing Dr. Price's Gospel of Marcion, where he reconstructs the whole thing. Now that's based on the work that's been done, I think, online. There's like, I can't think of the site right now, but some scholars have proposed some verses, that would consist of it and how long it should be and what, therefore, you could eliminate. So Dr. Price went ahead and just tried to figure out, well, if we know that, what would it actually look like as a coherent textual whole? So I just took his Pre-Nicene New Testament Luke version, which I had digitized, but is now different from the Human Bible version. He made a rewrite of it. But I'm looking at the original Pre-Nicene version and just eliminating the verses. I'm also throwing in some things like he includes things that he thought Marcion would have included, but the ecclesiastical redactor, who he usually identifies with Polycarp, or perhaps Lucas, the earlier version of Luke, before it was fully redacted, would have left stuff out. So I'm going through and color coding stuff that he's including, say, Markan language and things like that, in a different color so that it stands out. And I've never read the footnotes of that until I'm going through it, right? And he's talking about a reference to serpents and scorpions that in Luke, where it mentions that when he sends out his apostles to everywhere he's going to go before he heads for Jerusalem, and then when he gives them their blessing, tells them that they'll have power to over snakes and serpents and scorpions and things like that. And then in the footnote, Dr. Price mentions that it sounds like those things are under the control of the devil, but the way it's worded, you could say that it's referring to Jehovah, the Old Testament God, the demiurge, the creator, who created those things in Genesis, right? So all those nasty things were created by God. And then he quotes 2 whole lines of a Monty Python song in the footnote. And I'm just cracking.
He's hilarious. I love that guy.
No one else in the world would do that, that I could think of. Nobody.
No one.
And you got it right on the money too. Like, I think this is from their album Contractual Obligations. It was one they had to do after they more or less wanted to break up already, but they still had to do another album, comedy album. And there's a song by Eric Idle on there about all things foul and nasty. The Lord done made them all and stuff. But I'm not even close. But Dr. Price has had it nailed. As far as I could tell, they were exactly right. If I want to look them up on the internet.
Yeah, it reminds me. I saw recently The Meaning of Life, and I happened to come across it in the scene where they're singing in church, and they're singing that please Lord, don't burn us.
Lord, you are so absolutely huge. We're all really impressed down here, I can tell you. Yeah, that's a good scene. Of course, sometimes Dr. Price doesn't get it right. Like, he kept referring to Star Trek V as if it was Star Trek VI. So you would like Star Trek V, the undiscovered country, and they would talk about the Klingons quoting Shakespeare, but that's actually Star Trek VI, the undiscovered country. So he doesn't make the occasional mistake on stuff.
Yeah.
So if you look at the print version of, I think, The Christ Myth Theory and Its Problems, it says Star Trek V there, but my ebook is correct.
Yeah.
My ebook version has been corrected. But unfortunately, Frank Zindler, his wife, was really going through the worst of her cancer before she passed away. And hither to that, Frank was doing a lot of the editing, proof editing, copy editing to Dr. Price's works before they were published, and they were really good, you know. But Christ-Smith and its Theory, the print book, there's a lot of mistakes in it. There are duplicate page numbers. There are references to footnotes that aren't there anymore because, and also the opposite. There's footnotes to text that's been removed. There's misnumbered footnotes, all kinds of stuff. So I tried to make corrections to everything in the ebook, the page numbers, everything. Just because, you know, I could. But that was, and that subsequently after that, you know, the stuff that he worked on after she passed away was back to speed because he didn't have that burden, you know, because he wasn't distracted.
You reminded me when you referred to color coding. There's no feature in Kindle to use multicolor coding of text, is there?
Actually, there is.
Really?
Yeah, because I was reading, I don't know if it was Doherty's book against Bart Ehrman's "Did Jesus Exist?" or if it was Bart Ehrman and the Quest of the Historical Jesus. One of those. But there was whole sections in multiple different colors, usually brown, like a orange brown, like that. But it kind of depends on what colors you're using on your Kindle. I prefer to use like a parchment scroll, darkish background with black lettering. Some people like white on black or black on white, something like that. I need something like low light, keep from getting eye strain. So kind of like dim colors works for me the best. But even so, you know, you could tell it was in different colors. It was meant to be that way.
No, I mean, are you talking? I'm talking about like for myself to use certain colors
Oh
for
no, you can't. You can
certain.
highlight. You can use
Yeah,
highlighting on there.
yeah, that's the thing. I want to color code my own analysis.
Ugh, don't do it on a Kindle though.
Yeah.
Do you have a larger Kindle, like a 29-inch?
No, no.
Because I have the 7-inch Fire. And I'll tell you, I don't really do any kind of serious work on that. If I was going to do something to a Kindle ebook, though, I had to, I would use the Kindle for PCs, the desktop version. Is that a little bit easier to work with? And once you purchase a Kindle book, it goes into the cloud, so you can download it to any authorized device or app that you're using for the Kindle. Amazon. I wish that Kindle ebooks had certain functionality like EPUB books that are used on Nooks and iOS devices and so forth. You can embed an audio file inside the ebook that will turn the page as it's reading. Now you have the built-in computer generated voice that will turn the page and read on a Kindle, but I'm talking about, say, like embedding Dr. Price's audiobook of The Night of the Living Savior with the ebook version and have it read and have the pages turn while you're listening to Dr. Price, that kind of stuff, which they don't do. So I just wish there was more bells and whistles in Kindle to play with. I have to use the facilities. I'll be right back. I got some water too. Jeez, it's getting dry. David asks, is there a Kindle API that people can make their own features? I do not think so. I don't think there's any way to extend it or anything of that nature. Now, some things like Caliber, ebook management software, you can do some interesting things with ebooks, and that even has like server functionality for distributing material to read, and that has a lot of extensibility. So you can probably do stuff after you get these Kindle books into a different environment, maybe. Yeah, Caliber is very useful to me. There's other software too that comes in handy. Now, what I'm trying to do is, if you have a Kindle book with functioning footnotes that go back and forth from text to footnote and back again, I'm trying to find a way to import that stuff into Logos Bible software and still have those links function without having to mess with them, because the compiler for Logos Bible software just ignores hyperlinks like that. The only hyperlinks that it recognizes is hidden bookmarks, but only created by the table of contents. So I'm looking at the HTML code underlying all this stuff, and I cannot see any difference between the hyperlinks of the table of contents that it's actually using and footnote links, except that they're usually named TOC and a number, and then the footnote references are some different style. So I experimented all day today, and I actually found a way to get like half of them to work, and I can't figure out why the other half didn't work. But just with going into the code and making some tag changes and changing around the HTML span class stuff, I was actually able to get it to work. And then I thought, well, since I only got half of it to work, I should go back and try to go through the process again and see if I can get the rest of it to work. But then I completely forgot how I got to that point, and I have not been able to get back to where I was again. So I'll probably spend tomorrow trying to get back to where I was earlier today. And I hate that. But there's just so many ways. It's partly how you're exporting the Kindle file in Caliber, and then how you're editing the HTML file, because you have to eventually save it as a Word document. And apparently the compiler takes advantage of certain coding, XML coding, in the Word document in order to do its magic as far as links and hyperlinks and Bible links and all this other stuff. So I have to figure out exactly what it's using in those Word documents in order to get the compile right, but I have to do it in HTML because I can't really work with the XML files and get them to work like that. So I have to look at first HTML, make the changes, and then change it over to docx format, which is XML type document. But I'm getting close because, like I said, I got half of them to work, and why the other ones didn't, I don't know yet. But because I messed up and I went backwards and then tried to get back to where I was, again, I kind of screwed myself over. And so once I get back to that point where I can get partially to work again, then maybe I could then figure it out from there. But the advantage of having it in Logos is that everything in your library is interlinked. You compile it, all the Bible references are automatically tagged except for the ones that don't have any book references. If you just happen to talking about Mark and mention chapter 14 verses 1 through 7, But without putting mark next to that, it doesn't know that that's a Bible reference. So you'd have to actually add manual tags in your Word document for those to function. But the majority of just about anything you import would be automatically tagged. So, and then you're able to search, by various things. So you're in the Bible software, you're looking at something, you can search there, and then you've got everything else at your fingertips to search at the same time for information. So if I want to search for a topic like mythicism, and I do a search in Logos because I have all Dr. Price's books, I have most of Acharya S's, I've got 5 or 6 Carrier's books, I've got 2 of Doherty's books in there, and I was started to work on Jesus Puzzle, but I decided not to bother because of the other book and all this other stuff. So when I do a search on mythicism, then I've got hits and multiple hits in 20 or 30 books, and then I could look at all those references and do research and whatnot. So I like everything integrated where I can just call everything up and have everything at my beck and call, so to speak. And following the arguments, especially in biblical criticism and scholarship, a lot depends on having quick access to the Bible verses that are being referenced. And since I have 30 or 40 English translations in Logos of English, and then I've got original languages too, I can do all that kind of stuff. Dead Sea Scrolls, Septuagints, Targums, New Testament, everything, whatever I want. So it's not cheap though. The last time I bought a full package is when I upgraded from Logos version 3 to 4, and I did a cross grade over from what I had was Scholar's Gold version, so I cross graded over to upgrade to Logos 4's version of Gold, and I never bought anything other than individual resources and packages since then. So, but all told, probably I've spent about $4,000 since about 2004 or 5, something like that. But I got a lot of good stuff, a lot of cool stuff. And you never know what you're going to find out, because Robert Eisenman, I was talking to him about doing a new version of his book, The Dead Sea Scrolls Uncovered. And that book was the first to release 50 plates of Dead Sea Scrolls material that had never been released before. So he and a scholar named Weiss published this book with actual photographic plates of these fragments and then English translations, so 50 English translations. And I thought, yeah, I could do this ebook and redo it with the pictures, but wouldn't it be really good to have the actual Unicode Hebrew searchable in an ebook so you could actually search for this stuff? So I'm starting to go through this project, and the first thing I noticed was that the Dead Sea Scrolls Study Edition and more recent versions of the Dead Sea Scrolls are not putting the same fragments together that Eisenman and his colleague did. So you're looking at a text that is different from the way it's currently reconstructed. And then it wasn't so easy because then I had to, hunt around for the correct text to put in there and try to reformat it so that it looks halfway decent from the software that I had most of that stuff in already, but I couldn't use it. And then second of all, because of the ability to search, I'm finding good size fragments of maybe about 3 or 4 or 5 words that are part of these sectarian manuscripts that could very well be biblical. fragments instead of sectarian manuscript fragments, because they're matching up with things like the Targums and also just the Hebrew Bible. But because no one really had the ability to search these scrolls digitally in one place like I could, that never came up, or even the possibility had never come up. So I thought that was pretty cool that I could actually go through and say, well, I'm sorry, but this possibly is not part of this manuscript, that this is actually possibly a big biblical fragment that belongs somewhere else, and that's really significant. And, coming from little old me, I thought was really cool. But that's when I was like a month away from starting school. And I just thought, well, I better just bow out now instead of get involved in this and then not have the time to actually do it. So I just told Dr. Eisenman that, I'm just not going to be able to carry through with this. Sorry. But boy, would I have loved to go through that stuff. But what I am doing right now is digitizing The Creation of Christ by Paul Couchot. There's a lot of French in it and a good portion of Greek. And Frank Zindler's daughter, Catherine, really couldn't do it justice. So Frank asked me if I'd be interested in doing it. And I said, yeah, because I wanted to get that book anyway. I was going to go to Bart Ehrman's alma mater, Wheaton College, which is like 20 some miles from my house. Take my hand scanner down to there and go ahead and scan the. Did I meet me or did somebody else meet me? Yeah, we had a rambunctious person in the group. He muted me or something, but Reuben removed him. What is Dr. Eisenman like? He's quite a character. Let me put it that way. Let's see. Well, I'd say he's a very confrontational person. Very opinionated. Very honest, though. Very honest person. But, somebody you'd like right off the bat, even if he's a little grumpy.
Price has like highest praise for him, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. And I remember I was telling somebody this, I think, Sunday in the SOBs chat. But he wrote an article in Jerusalem Post, and it was just an article, right? Like an extended blog post, really. And it was so convoluted that I had to go to his book, James the Brother of Jesus, and go to the back of the book and look up the charts that he has of people's relationships, because I was just getting lost in all these people, who was related to whom, who was descended from whom, who are these people in the first place. So it's when he starts going on, he really goes off and he brings a lot of different things into his argument. So if you ever read his book, it's quite an experience. And what I had proposed to do also was that he wrote James the Brother of Jesus, and the New Testament Code, I think, was the second book. He originally wanted that as one book, and it would have been about 2,000 pages or something like that. So it's published as no. So he ended up doing a second volume. And I said, well, in the ebook world, it really doesn't matter, 2,000 pages, whatever. You can have an ebook and you can have 5 books in it, But the thing is, rather than just combine the 2 books, why not put them together in a real sense? Combine the information, simplify stuff, use charts, hyperlinks to stuff, so that you don't have to crawl around the book looking for something if you're trying to figure out what's going on. And after reading this stuff, I'm thinking, geez, I really don't want to volunteer for that project now, because it would have been just a major undertaking. What I would have approached is I would have looked at each book and just outlined each book, as fine-tuned as I could get it down to 14 levels or whatever it took, and do each book and then match up the outlines and see where they overlap and how they fit together. Put the outlines together and then start weeding out stuff, out of the main text anyway, and putting it into different things, side boxes and footnotes and whatever it would take, just to keep it more streamlined. But it was just, when I saw the amount of work that would require, I just balked. And there's Couchot's book is a real problem too, because it was written in French, translated in English in the 30s. So I'm looking at this stuff, and I'm looking at references, say, to Josephus, and they're not right, because I'm finding this reference material in totally different books, or one book off, but there's no pattern. So the first thing I'm thinking was, well, there must be a different numbering system from back then, so I just got to figure out what it is, and everything will be cool. But it's not. It's just somehow very careless translator somehow is just getting it all wrong. And I'm even looking at the exact editions that Couchot is quoting in French. So I'm looking for his exact quotes in French in these books, exact year, exact publisher, and the translator is wrong. It's in a different part of the book. So that's telling me that this is all a translator's problem. So I have to go through, and if he references Josephus and somebody wants to look that up, they're going to be screwed. So I'm putting in brackets after the translator's version, SIC, S-I-C, and then the correct references. So instead of breezing through this thing, and my biggest problem is just making sure diacritics are correct in French and in Greek, not too big of a deal, I now have to go through and check all the references. Otherwise, what good is it? And luckily, it's in 2 volumes, but it's the chapters are short. I think I said as short as a Dan Brown chapter. Not very long. I'll be right back. I'm just gonna go grab my smokes out of the garage. Good night, Doug. Thanks for stopping in. Ruben, you didn't miss much. So now that you're back, you could probably take us offline, I would imagine. I don't think anybody, does anybody else want to continue speaking live?
No.
Because I'm getting talked out anyway.
Yeah, you've been marathoning.
Monologuing, just like the villains do before they get nailed. David doesn't want to type live, yeah. Don't worry, David, the chat logs are usually put up online so everybody can see what you typed anyway. Because I've been careful kind of what I say on the air, but a lot of times some of the things I typed in chat I probably don't want people to see either.
I know.
But
I gotta.
Reuven usually publishes chat logs from like the SOBs and the Hangouts to various places. And I wouldn't worry about it too much, you know. The only people you're hiding from is real live good people. Facebook, Google, NSA, the Islamic State, all those guys know what you're typing anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's kind of amusing on Facebook, you know, when people want to join the Bible Geek listeners, for example, but they have absolutely no information in their profile. There's nothing you can find out about them at all. And it's like people like me, people like you guys, potential friends on Facebook are the only ones that are not getting information. There's nothing being hid from Facebook, you know. Not really. You're using their system. So exactly who are you being privacy from, really? The people that probably are the most danger to you are the ones that have free access.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of weirdos out on the internet, for sure.
I came across something on Facebook. You familiar with this group, Openly Secular?
Yeah, it rings a bell.
I guess Dawkins is trying to promote atheist. He feels like they need protection the way the LGBT communities do.
He's probably right.
Yeah. And Bill Maher is, willing to join the fight.
There was a guy that wanted to join the Bible Geek listeners, and he had joined Facebook just specifically to do so. He's a longtime listener to the podcast and all that. But, I'm very cautious about who I let in because I don't want to expose the group to spammers and people who are in there to cause trouble. So I always ask people exactly why do you want to come into the Bible Geek listeners? Are you aware of what the group is about? So forth. And not in a bad way. I don't, what the hell do you want to join this group for kind of attitude. I just, ask them, just briefly tell me. And most of the time people come back with, well, I'd listened for a long time and or I want, I'm a fan of Dr. Price or something like that. So yeah, sure, come on in. But this guy took offense that I asked him and basically said, well, I don't want to come in now because, you should have let me in or recognized my name or something. I don't know. But, all I could do back was, well, based on what you just said, I would have gladly let you in, but, you have no interest, so you can just go back to listening on to the podcast online or whatever it is. So you just run into all kinds of different people, and you never know how somebody's going to react to something.
Yeah. Well, he's just it sounds like the world is revolves around him because he's just looking at it like, what, you saying you don't trust me? Like, well, why should I trust you? Who are you?
Yeah, and I just asked a few simple questions. I mean,
Yeah.
if he had just taken offense but said something, I was said, well, I'm sorry if I offended you, welcome to the group. But if you just, your next comment is, well, fuck it, I'm not coming in. We're getting